Monday Night Football, undefeated Steelers versus often defeated Washington football team. Man, they need a nickname. Steelers were up 2 touchdowns in this one, but for just the second time since 2004, Steelers blew a 14-point lead and lost. Washington pulling off the unlikely upset, taking advantage of a sloppy Steelers offense. 7 drop passes, the most in any game this season, and they dropped their shot at a perfect season as well. Here's Steelers head coach Mike Tomlin after the loss.
Different points along the journey, you get a chance to learn about yourself, who you are, what you're made of, individually and collectively, and it takes the journey to reveal that. And so, we're faced with a loss now, so we'll get an opportunity to smile in the face of it.
Remember, just 5 days ago, we sat here and we listened to Mike Tomlin say that last win, that was a little too close for us. We really need to buckle up and start grinding here. And then obviously they come out and this happens last night. Brian Westbrook joining us now. Brian, good morning to you. What did you learn about the Pittsburgh Steelers after last night's loss?
Good morning, Jenna. What I was reminded of, and I hopefully what the Steelers team was reminded of and learned last night, was that you can't play flawed football and expect to win in the NFL. And what we've seen from the Steelers the last couple of weeks, we saw 7 drops last week against the Ravens. We saw at least 7 last night. And Mike Tomlin said it in his press conference. You have to do the routine things routinely. They didn't do that. They haven't established a run. 14 carries, 21 yards. They couldn't establish a run. Hopefully they find a way to get Pouncey back as well as James Conner. I think that's going to help their running game a lot. But to me, the most important thing that we didn't see last night that the Steelers have to know they have to do is produce turnovers. They produced turnovers versus the Ravens JV team, and they were barely able to get a win. They were produced 2. Last night, they weren't able to produce any turnovers. They're the best team in the league at takeaways. They have to produce those turnovers to get shorter fields for the offense, to get additional opportunities to possess the football, and they weren't able to do that. And when you watch this team, Jenna, you see some cracks, some flaws offensively, them not being able to move the ball. Yep. And if they can't find a way to pressure the quarterback without Bud Dupree being there, then those turnovers may not come as often as they have in the past. And then that now you start talking about a team that was once 11-0, now has some cracks in it. So there's some questions to be answered there for Pittsburgh.
100% B. There's 2 big question marks for me. And you talked about a Bud Dupree. That's a big loss for him. He tears his ACL last week against the Baltimore Ravens. Why is that big? Because you got Bud Dupree, you got Watt on the edges, and these are guys that can play the run and they can play the pass. They stay on the field. Nick talks about it, and he talked about it going back to the beginning of the season. This is probably one of the most dominant front sevens in the National Football League. Yep. So when you look at what's happening on the defensive side, you lose Bud Dupree. Last night, you lose Rob Spill, their linebacker, nickname for my guy. And then you also lose Joe Hayden to a concussion. This defense is good when they're all together. This, as you know, B, around this time of the year, December, this is a war of attrition. Who's healthy? There's a lot of guys walking around like zombies, the Walking Dead in these locker rooms. Now the defensive side is starting to face these injuries. Offensively, the other question mark is, where's the running game? And I know, man, I'm a wide receiver, and every time we talk about offense, I always talk about run game, run game, run game. Why is that important? Because when you have a defense and you have a run game, it opens up the pass game. So how do you go from being one of the best running teams in the National Football League the first 5 weeks, averaging over 100 yards a game, to now being one of the worst at running? You're not even running the ball. You had 13 carries last night for 20-something yards. That is a problem. This is not let's let Big Ben cook. We're not, or let's let Big Ben bake. Let's say that. We need to see them get back to running the ball. Now, they didn't have Connor, Nick, but they've had this problem when Connor was there.
And Big Ben, a big fan of baked goods and pastries, so I think that works well. So you mentioned the injuries on defense. I would argue the last time the Steelers looked dominant was when they had Devin Bush. Devin Bush, remember, he went down in that Browns game back on October 18th. So no Devin Bush, no Bud Dupree. All of a sudden, that best front 7 in the NFL, you lose 2 of your best guys. Now, TJ Watt's still awesome. This is a very good defensive line. I'm not saying they're not still very good, but those are big losses for them. The other problem for them is, and I know you guys hate when I do this, Big Ben, as the season's gotten longer, starting to look his age a bit. Show America the numbers. First 9 games. Look at Big Ben. Look at him. Just cooking, baking, maybe even a nice little sauteing going on there. Last 3 games, that damn smoke detector's going off again. Big Ben's burnt the bacon. 84 rating. Throwing the ball a million times a game. All dinks and dunks, though, except for the occasional deep pass down the field. And Wild's defenses know what Pittsburgh's going to do. They're going to dink and dunk and then take the occasional deep sideline shot. They have no intermediate passing game. And, the Steelers tried to lose to the Cowboys. They let the Titans a month and a half ago score 17 straight points. I didn't think they looked particularly good in either game against the Ravens, despite the Ravens quarterback, whether it was Lamar or RG3, turning the ball over a dozen times. I just think the team's shaky right now, and I think they don't have an offensive identity, Wilds.
All right.
What?
With all
It's
this
true.
talk about
Everything I
let
said is
Baker
true.
cook and let everyone cook, Nick dusted off a vintage take from the preseason that Big Ben would wear down as he pulled it out of the wine cellar and blew it off. Oh, look at this. The Big Ben is getting old take. It's a fine vintage. Okay, here's the thing. Here's something weird that I would say. Brian, I'll throw it to you. If we were telling, like, hey, Wilds, what are you having for lunch? And I was like, you know what I'm going to have? Thanksgiving leftovers. You'd be like, what? You're still eating Thanksgiving Day food right now? Thanksgiving was forever ago. It's got to be spoiled and rotten. I'm like, yeah, you know why? That's the last time Washington played a game. Meanwhile, the poor Pittsburgh Steelers, who were competing with the Chiefs, and they were undefeated, to play 3 games in 12 days. So this idea, and I love Chase Young, I love number 99, but he's like, we were more aggressive, we were flying around. Yeah, you think? You've been hanging out since Thanksgiving. It's insane that we're not talking about how the pressure of the schedule and the Steelers finally reared their heads. I'm not ready to talk about systemic issues with the Steelers when maybe they just need to chill and take a breath and take that Thanksgiving Day nap.
Yeah.
It's not a question, but I want to throw it out to you, Brian.
No, I think you're absolutely right. Playing 3 games in 12 days certainly takes a toll on it, especially the way that they have to play them. I'm talking about, we think we're going to play on Sunday night and then Monday and then Tuesday.
Yep.
They've been changing the schedule back and forth, and that puts a pressure on the football team. It also takes you out of your routine. Randy, you understand football players are creatures of habit. And so when you're out of that routine, it completely changes everything that you have on. But I do want to mention this. Not every loss is built the same. Sometimes when you have a loss, when you've been undefeated, it refocuses you. It allows you to get back to your center point where now you're focusing on the small things. When you win so many games in a row, you just think it's going to continue to happen. This loss for a Mike Tomlin coach football team is probably a much better thing than for a team that doesn't have a strong leader like Mike Tomlin. I think the Pittsburgh Steelers bounce back.
Good.
All right, let's